Hello and welcome to The Stack. This week we speak with fashion designer Bianca Saunders on her new zine exploring her Jamaican heritage. Plus, Simon Freeman from beautiful running magazine Like the Wind on his exciting plans for 2025. And finally, our very own Grace Charlton tells us all about Monocle's annual design newspaper, our Salone del Mobile special. Enjoy the show. From Midori House in London, this is The Stack, 30 minutes of print industry analysis, and I am Fernando Augusto Pacheco. We start the show welcoming back to The Stack Simon Freeman, editor-in-chief and founder of running magazine Like the Wind. The quarterly title is clearly a success story, with over 40 editions so far, and even a Japanese spin-off title, plus several books and more. A pleasure to welcome Simon to the studio to tell me about his plans for 2025 and partnerships ahead of the Boston Marathon.
So we looked at magazines in the surfing world like the Surfer's Journal. We looked at cycling magazines like Rouleur. And my wife and I, we're the co-founders, and we just wondered whether there was an appetite for a long-form storytelling magazine about run culture, which was the magazine we wanted to read. So we launched it. And, 11 years ago now, that wasn't a given that there would be an audience or any interest in it. But we didn't think it needed to be an enormous success for us to want to keep doing it. It was a labour of love for probably 8 or 9 years. And then now we feel as though it's caught a wave. Running's definitely having a moment. I think indie publishing is having a moment. And we sort of feel as though we're sat at the intersection of those two things.
It's funny you talk about, will there be an appetite perhaps for a running title with that perspective from the indie publishing world? My God, even here at Midori House, I feel in the minority. I'm not necessarily a runner, but so many people here go on runs, and I know I can see how good it is for that. So there's clearly something going on.
I think running is now definitely more popular than it was when we launched 11 years ago. What wasn't popular 11 years ago was ink on paper magazines. So many people said to me, you have a voice, it's worth publishing, doing something, but ink on paper is insanity. Well, why are you doing that? This was 2014. It was magazines were dropping like flies. Everything became more difficult. Printing became more difficult. Distribution became more difficult. Your route to market was more complicated because everything was going online, right? And we were being somewhat stubborn about saying, well, we want to publish an ink on paper magazine that people take 20 minutes of their day to sit and read a story. So I think that the big change that we've seen is that now with stores like Mag Culture or Shriji News just down the road from where we're recording here, there are outlets where people are really seeking out good quality long-form storytelling publications about a niche topic in which they're really interested.
How did the magazine change if you compare issue 1 of Like the Wind and the one I'm holding in my hand right now, issue 44? Has much changed, perhaps?
Well, I would say literally the only thing that's changed is the quality of the story, the quality of the design. When we started, we ran around with a begging bowl asking people to write for us for this fledgling magazine that, kind of didn't really exist. Now we're in a position to pay contributors, and so the quality has probably tenfold improved. The concept hasn't changed from issue 1, which is exploring running culture through long-form storytelling. We just do it better.
That's a very good answer. But your life has changed now. You live in Switzerland now.
Mm-hmm.
So is that where you make the magazine? How does it work?
So the team is globally distributed, and we've actually increased in the last 6 months. We have more than doubled the size of the team that work on the magazine. The magazine has always been entirely globally distributed. So our creative director's based in Australia, Julie and I are in Switzerland. We have colleagues on the West Coast and the East Coast of the US. We have a colleague or a small team that publishes Like the Wind Japan, who are based in Tokyo and Kyoto. So actually, as I sit here talking to you today, about 2 weeks ago, we had our first ever all-hands meeting of the whole team, which involved some people getting up at an insanely early hour and some people trying to stay awake until a very, very late hour in order for us to all be together. So the fact that Julie and I are in Switzerland is really irrelevant. There's never been an office for Like the Wind. We've always just worked with, a remote team. It's becoming more challenging as the team grows, but it's a fun challenge.
You did mention Japan. You also brought a copy of Like the Wind Japan, which is the first, let's say, international edition of the magazine. So tell us why Japan? How did that work? I can understand why Japan. It's a wonderful market for magazines. But tell us a bit the story about this one.
Well, so one of the other things I brought in today was a book that Julie and I published called Running Wild, and that was published with Thames and Hudson. And at the time that we worked with the team, with Lucas Dietrich and the team over there, we didn't understand this, but non-English language versions are essentially licensed to other publishers. So there's an Italian version of Running Wild, there's a German version, and there was a book publisher in Japan who was translating, or who does translate, English language running books into Japanese. And so our contacts at Thames and Hudson came back and said, we think we have a Japanese publisher for the book, but actually he'd like to talk to you about the magazine as well. Are you open to that conversation? So we said, sure, why not? Got on a call with Kyo Fujishiro, who has a business called Monocle, where he publishes English language running books and translates them into Japanese. And he said, I'd love to do your book, but also can we come to an agreement where I publish Like the Wind in Japanese? And we had it was a very, very short conversation because, as you say, the Japanese run culture, the run scene in Japan is enormous. And we knew that we weren't selling copies of Like the Wind in Japan because obviously it's an English language magazine. So Kyo comes with way more experience and prestige than we have as a publisher. He worked for some of the big publishing companies on titles such as GQ and Wired. And he is a really passionate runner and had left that kind of corporate publishing world to set up his own business. And we just said, yeah, sure, it sounds great. So he essentially takes stories from the Like the Wind archive, translates them into Japanese. So it's not a direct translation of the current issue because we couldn't work out a way that we would be able to give him the entire issue early enough for him to translate it and publish it. And then he augments the probably 70% of translated stories with about 30% of the magazine is stories that he's creating himself in Japan, which has an added, an unexpected benefit, which is that we then get to translate those stories into English and publish them in our magazine about the Japanese run scene.
Everyone helping each other.
Exactly.
But the good thing about stories from Like the Wind archive, they don't necessarily age, I would say, right? It's very different from other. And I want to talk to you as well about running itself. As I said, I'm in the minority here in Midori House. I don't run, but can anyone run?
Yeah, I don't like to just use a gross generalization. Of course, that is not the case. Not everyone can run. And probably, in some cases, people shouldn't necessarily. But I think most people can to some extent. I'm not a big advice giver. I'm not a coach or something like that. I'm an advocate for it because I think it's certainly changed my life and I've seen it change many people's lives.
It really does.
It really does.
From the stories I hear.
Yeah, for sure. In so many ways. What I would say is that there is a current boom in running. If you go onto any social media channel, you'll see there's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people posting about running. My advice is always just go slowly, just take it easy. Like there's no race to race. Just get out. If you run for half an hour, a couple of times a week, that's fine. That's great. That will get you started. And then it does tend to be something that people get bitten by the bug, and the next thing they're sending me messages saying, hey, I've signed up for my first 10K or my first half marathon, and that just fills me with joy. I think it's wonderful.
And I got a subscription for Like the Wind.
And I've got, yes, please, yes.
Well, then let's talk about running. I know the Boston Marathon is coming out very soon. It's one of the most important in the world. You have a special project there, right?
Yeah, we're actually collaborating with our good friends at Tracksmith and on a newspaper, basically, that we'll be publishing.
Full circle.
Yeah, full circle indeed. Because those guys have an amazing kind of history and tradition of storytelling. They've actually been going for about as long as Like the Wind magazine has, and they've done much better commercially than we have, but they built their brand to some degree on storytelling. So we're super delighted that we're able to work with them on a newspaper. One will be published in Boston, then another one in London, and then we're hoping that we'll continue through all of the sort of major big city marathons, producing this newspaper in collaboration with them.
Do you have a favorite marathon? I wonder if you can actually answer.
I could get in a lot of trouble.
Yes.
So I'm a born and bred Londoner.
Yeah.
And I did run my personal best time in London. But actually, from an experience perspective, I have to say New York is unbelievable. I loved the New York Marathon, few times that I ran it.
And which month is that?
That's at the end of the year. It's in November.
Okay.
Yeah.
And, let's look back at Like the Wind as a business as well. These days, how do you reach your customers? Because we've been discussing here on the Stack problems with distribution of magazines and everything. Are you doing more subscriptions, or are you finding, new ways as well to make sure that the magazine will reach the public and the reader?
This is our singular focus now.
Yeah.
I think the product...
Very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the product is good. I don't think we have a problem whereby people are not subscribing because the product's not good enough. I think the problem is they don't know about the magazine. So like everybody, we have, a strategy for using social media to try and reach people. But I think that's a pretty expensive and blunt tool. So we use it to the degree that we can. I think the big focus for us is around partnerships. So Tracksmith is a good example. We don't sell advertising in the magazine. We have brand partnerships. So we have a small number, 5 brands that we work with for a year. And we are very specific about who we work with. They need to be brands that appreciate and value storytelling in the way that we do.
Like ASICS,
ASICS, yeah. We work with ASICS, yeah. New Balance, the North Face, Hoka, and Arc'teryx this year.
Really good brands.
Amazing brands.
Yeah, incredible brands.
Amazing brands. And they are really genuinely committed to, the culture of running, building community, storytelling. So it's a wonderful, really reciprocal partnership. The other thing is, and this is taking a bit of a diversion, but it feels as though what this running boom is doing is revitalizing specialty run retail. So those stores where you're not buying a pair of running sneakers in a general store, you're going to a running store specifically for advice and to buy a product. Those are great places for us.
And they become cool, those shops, right?
Yeah, it's probably a second wave, an emergent. There's a store in London called Progress. It's amazing. I mean, they're in Spitalfield Market, and it's just a really beautifully merchandised space. And I see Like the Wind displayed. I mean, our friends at Tracksmith have copies of Like the Wind magazine on the coffee table in their store here on Charlton Street. So that, I think, is a really good outlet for us, because the people that are going to those stores are the ones for whom running is a lifestyle and they care. So Like the Wind sort of sits very neatly in those spaces.
Thank you very much, Simon. And to buy the latest issue of Like the Wind, go to likethewindmagazine.com. British Jamaican menswear designer Bianca Saunders released her third zine, 38 Love Lane, this Thursday. The photojournal was made in collaboration with Amsterdam-based photographer Kwabena Seki Apia-Nti, who set out to intimately capture the personal exploration of Saunders' Jamaican heritage. Visuals honor the beauty of everyday life on the Caribbean island, telling the story of 2 men and their families. Meanwhile, words by writer Jordan Anderson, an interview with Bianca's mother, Yvonne Saunders, and photos she took during her travels in her early 20s portray the designer's identity beyond the striking garments seen across the imagery. Speaking to Monocle's Maria Papakliantos, Saunders shares how the project took shape, her enduring love for zines, and their connection to her creative practice.
This is actually my third zine since I've started the brand, or I guess started what I was doing. And zine has always been a way to kind of like connect the research of what I've wanted to kind of explore. The first zine I did was Personal Politics, which is like exploring like Black masculinity. And that's what kind of launched the framework of like what my brand is. And then the second one was We Are One and the Same. And I think it kind of touched on like the 2 twins. One was male, one was female. And just in terms of the connection of like how we are. We have our similarities, but we also have our differences in terms of what we look like. And I think that kind of brought in a bit more of a genderless approach. And then this one, 30 Love Lane, was kind of about like my cultural background and identity exploration. And a lot of it is kind of like, I do use a lot of like reference images from my mum and my experience of Jamaica as well. And being British Jamaican and that identity exploration has been a big part of that. Then I guess I connected with Kwalbina, so he's a photographer that I worked with on the zine, and it was quite great because in terms of the creative, we was equally able to kind of explore it in different ways. So I guess for him, it was more exploration. So we followed, I guess, 2 guys that were based out there, got to know their families. They took him around and stuff like that. And then the name 30 Love Lane became a thing because of one of the roads that we shot on.
Oh, okay.
And then I was showing him like my family images, and there was such a similarity of like what was then and now. So my mum had quite a lot of images when she in her early 20s, but Jamaica doesn't really changes. I feel like countries like that are very much more slower pace, and it's kind of like familiarity is a big touch point of kind of connection.
Amazing. I mean, I know in the zine it says, I picked this quote that I really like. It says, "It's a portrait of Jamaica that feels intimate yet infinite, the connection to something larger than ourselves." Can you tell me about like how you view Jamaica and how the zine portrays that version that you think of when you think of Jamaica?
I think there's just a warmth to the images, and I think there's a slight distance but also connection. I think that's what I get from the feeling. Like every time I go back, it's like, okay, it reminds, well, of course I'm born here, but it reminds me of like my full circle of like who I am and the things I've learned, like the traditions I've been brought up on and the connection with the people that I feel related to. So I think that's what it essentially does for me. And the writing was done by Jordan Anderson. So he is a Jamaican that lives in Milan. So he was the previous editor of fashion, NSS magazine based in Milan. And I guess he relocated to Milan to kind of like push his journey within fashion. And Jamaica is such a small country, but it, of course, is quite like globally known. But to be able to do opportunities like that, the global scale of the Western world does help and prevail that a bit more. So I guess his experience on that also aided in terms of the wording.
I mean, I've seen the zine and I've seen some amazing visuals that were captured by Kwabena. Can you tell me a bit about your collaboration, how it was working together, and I guess how the visuals kind of portray both of your visions of Jamaica?
I think a lot of the time when it comes to like images, I always prefer it to be more like documentary style. Mm-hmm. So when we were thinking about it, we didn't want it to be like overly fashion and overly staged. So like in terms of the clothing pieces that are included from the brand, it's kind of like seamed in and out. So it is a bit more natural. So there was a couple of pieces that I guess I got him to bring over, and then the stylist picked and chose. And then some pieces, it was like selecting what was okay for it to be included that wasn't my brand. So it kind of felt a bit like some of the images of one of my interns was looking through them, he thought it was like a research image that we had. And I was like, no, that's actually part of the zine. That's a new image, not like a reference. Mm-hmm. So it's quite nice to have those elements to be able to like maybe even a couple of collections in could refer back to it.
Absolutely. I mean, also your mom was interviewed for the zine. Can you tell me a bit about how significant that is for you to have your mom be part of this? And is your mom someone that brings the Jamaican connection that you have as well into the brand?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. So with my mum, to be fair, that series of images that I chose for the zine is like things I've referenced in like Spring Summer 20, AW20, like different collections. I'm like, okay, let's pull this image out kind of thing from like her collection of images. My dad doesn't actually have that many images, or maybe he just doesn't show me them. Even though they are both Jamaican. But my mum, she's such a storyteller, and she's always talking about memories of when her aunt used to take her for like long summers in Jamaica. And then there was a point that she even like had an accent and went to school out there for a small while as well too. So I think her storytelling has influenced me in terms of like my vision of what I see my art fashion world as.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I guess, it shines through your work, like your heritage shines through all of your collection. Can you tell me about, how do you bring your practice into the zine as well? Like, how do you, I guess, translate that intersection between, the zine and fashion?
I think from the beginning, I kind of saw like my fashion world not just being the clothes and just being like the image and storytelling. I wanted it to kind of have like a sort of empathy and a rawness to it. And I wanted people to connect with it without having to connect to the clothes. And those projects that I'm able to do is what really keeps me excited about fashion and what keeps me inspired about what I'm doing. And I guess from the start, that's what I wanted to do. So I was like, we need to bring this back kind of thing. And I need to have those creative spurts of having the fashion exist without it being clothes.
What are some conversations that you're hoping the zine can, open up between, the readers, the people who get to interact with it? What are you hoping are some of the takeouts that, they can have from it?
I think a lot of the time because we have the privilege of being able to travel the world so much, it's being able to connect with the people that actually live there. I think that's very important because sometimes a lot of the imagery I do see from Jamaica is like people go there, they don't really get to know the people in the area, and it's just like, it's just kind of a bit fleeting. And then another thing I want people to take away from the zine is probably just family history and documentation of it, and actually knowing that there's a lineage of like having time exist within something physical, and that's important.
Thank you very much. Bianca Saunders there. You can buy a copy of the zine 38 Love Lane on biancasaunders.com. And this week, some members of the Monocle crew were in Milan for Salone del Mobile. The event is incredibly important for Monocle, so much so that we just published our Salone del Mobile special, Monocle's annual design newspaper, with a special insight into the world's premier furniture event. It was a pleasure to speak with Grace Charlton, Deputy Project Editor for the paper. Grace Charlton, our lovely associate editor, welcome to The Stack. It's your first time.
Hi, Faye. I'm so excited. I love what you do, and we both share a passion for the print media format, so I'm very excited to be here.
I'm already telling I want to bring you back later in the year. We need to talk fashion magazines. There's so much to discuss. But you're here for one reason today. Monocle, of course, as we do every year, we're launching our very own Salone del Mobile special newspaper, which I think is such a beautiful thing to have.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful product we do every year in the lead up to Milan Design Week, and it's a complete labour of love. I work on it with Monocle's design editor, Nick Manise, and we spend, months curating the story list, trying to figure out who's going to be cool, what is happening, what should people know about, who are the undercover designers that deserve a bit of attention, and then what are the big showstoppers going to be. So it's a really fun project to work on.
It must be a lot of research because, of course, you were there in Milan for Salone, which is ending tomorrow. But basically, you have to write the newspaper before it starts. So you really need to keep an eye what actually people will be talking about.
You have to be really friendly with PRs, which I think is a side of journalism and media that people don't necessarily talk about. But it is, woe is me. It's a lot of catching up over coffees and fabulous Marylebone cafes and asking them what their clients are doing and trying to get renders beforehand. So it is a tricky one to research as it the event hasn't happened when we send the newspaper to print, but we also really try to, even though Salone ends on Sunday, tomorrow, we want the newspaper to have a bit more longevity. So these are themes that are going to be current, forever, hopefully, sort of timeless design questions. And we also look to the year ahead and different events happening around the world, like, Copenhagen's 3 days of design. So it is timeless in the sense that it is, pre-Salone, during Salone, post-Salone. We're always trying to cover all our bases in one little newspaper.
And I think people should buy the newspaper, even if they haven't been to Salone for whatever reason, because, basically we dictate the trends of the whole year. In a way, I feel, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, Grace, Salone is becoming more and more important by the year, which is remarkable for an event. Of course, it's always been important, but there's a lot of strength and no competition almost.
Ooh, that's a big debate. I would actually say maybe Salone is becoming too big and it's sort of eating itself up. And the competition is definitely Copenhagen, even Dubai Design Week, smaller sort of more boutique fairs like Design Miami. So yeah, it is, but it is a beast. And every year it seems that more people are getting involved. Last year, a lot of fashion brands were there doing big cocktails in like these fabulous courtyards and palazzos around Milan. And this year, I've noticed that a lot more car brands are getting involved, like Maserati, Range Rover. So yeah, it's a fun way to predict what's going on in the design world, who is trying to get a piece of the cake, so to speak.
Give us a taster for the newspaper. I know there's so many stories, but I wonder, tell us about some of your favorites.
So some of my favorites, I'm going to try and not just say the ones that I've written, which is always
you can as well.
I'll get to that part. But the Salone del Mobile newspaper is also an ode to Milan, and we have this really amazing Milan-based editor called Ed Stocker, who is one of my favorite writers that we have in our roster. And
cheers to Ed.
Yeah, shout out to Ed Stocker. And he did this amazing like architecture historical deep dive around Milan in the Liberty style, which is very like floral and beautiful, and it's got a lot of like tinted glasses, which is funny because when you think about Milan, you think about industrial, very 50s, 60s, plastic, Geoponti, like that sort of vibe. But he sort of went a little bit further back and did an ode to the Liberty architecture. Other stories I really liked, now I'm going to mention ones that I've written. But I interviewed the designer Faye Toogood in her London headquarters, which is called the House of Toogood. And she is just so inspirational. She's one of the most prolific designers that's come out in the past few years. Like, she was named Designer of the Year in Paris at Maison & Objet. She was guest of honor at the Stockholm Furniture Fair. She's got collaborations with CC Tapi, Poltrona Frau, Tacchini. Like, she is just so in demand. And I met her at her studio, sat down with her with like a cup of tea, and we chatted for about an hour, and she's just so delightful. And then another piece I was really happy to report and write was Paula Gervais, who's actually a Brazilian-born.
Yes, I know her.
Yeah,
she's great.
She's so great. Amazing. She's from the fashion industry. Again, more crossover with design. She's now taken over Georg Jensen, which is a really very heritage design house from Copenhagen, and they do lots of silver, like beautiful silver objects. And she did this amazing thing during Salone, which is an ice cream kiosk. And they made this it's so cute. They made like a little collection of little cups and little coffee stirrers and popsicle sticks out of like the finest silver, hand hammered in Copenhagen, to serve like scoops of gelato and have a little mid-afternoon affogato pick-me-up. So yeah, that was really fun to hear about and then see.
Don't want to put you on the spot, but if from the newspaper, I wonder if there's any object or, I don't know, designer that you would pick for your own household.
Ooh, that's a good question. It's really hard because I like it all. I think it might have to be Faye Toogood. She did this bread and butter inspired modular sofa, which really does look like butter spread on a piece of bread. It sounds crazy, but it looks really cool. Also, I know you love butter yellow as well. It's got that sort of...
And I do like bread and butter.
And you love beige food, another shared passion of ours, media and beige food. Yeah, a lot of amazing lights as well. Salone, every 2 years, they switch from lights to kitchens and bathrooms. And this year, it's light, or Euroluce, as they call it. And Floss has these amazing super wire, that's the name of the light, designed by Forma Fantasma, who are one of the most amazing Milanese design duos out there. So I'd probably pick those two. I don't know if they'd go well together, though. They'd have to be for separate rooms.
Or the country house or something like that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Grace, and you're welcome back anytime on The Stack. You can buy your copy of our Salone del Mobile newspaper on monocle.com. And that's it for this week's show. My thanks to our editor, Jack Jewers, of course. Any comments or queries, feel free to write to me, Fernando, at fp@monocle.com. Remember, we're back next Saturday at 10 a.m. London time. Meanwhile, please subscribe to The Stack on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You've been listening to The Stack. I'm Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.